Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Live with Tanja. That's me from Tanja Kraus Horsemanship. I will give it some time for Facebook to let everyone know that I am live. And as you start logging on, please say hello or click the thumbs up or the love button or whatever you'd like to do to let me know that you're here and watching. I'm really excited about tonight's talk. I think it's a really interesting topic, and I'll get started pretty shortly. Hey Leah, how you going? I'm super excited that so many of our TKH peeps, hey Greta, and a lot of people who haven't necessarily been to TKH clinics in the past, hey Monique, have started doing their their TKH 100, which is a 100-day challenge. Anyone interested in what that's all about can find out, hey Michael, on our last newsletter. So Leah's saying she's up to day 11. That's pretty cool. Our last newsletter explains what the challenge is all about, and I'm really excited to see so many of you doing it. So definitely let me know how you're going with it. I'm loving all the feedback in our TKH group. Hey Hillary, how you going? So it's really excited to see everyone sharing their stories and just being a little bit motivated and seeing how little we can do. Hi Kylie. To keep training with our horses. I mean, we always say that every time you interact with your horse, you're either training them or detraining them. So all those times that we enter the paddock or interact with our horses are really important. And I think this 100-day challenge is really just putting it out there for people, and you guys are all sharing ideas, and people are talking about the little things that they're being able to do at feed time and things like that, which is really cool. We're so time limited. Yep, day 10 for Belinda, so that's really cool. Belinda and Leah are going really well. And hi Lisa, how you going? Hey Canada. Hey Helen. Great to see you all tuning in. Thank you so much. I'm really excited because this week is our 10th Monday Night Live show. Hey Gwenda. And that's really cool. That's a really cool milestone. 10 weeks we've been doing it, and it wouldn't still be happening without all of you guys, because obviously there'd be no point in doing that if people weren't interested in them and weren't enjoying them. Hey Macnut, how you doing? If people weren't enjoying them and they weren't watching them and things like that, we would have stopped doing them by now. So it's really thanks to you guys. Thank you for your support. That we're up to week 10, and we're just getting stronger. It's really, really cool. So those of you that are, hey Malcolm, wow, Malcolm's watching Monday Night Live, Facebook one week and Monday Night Live the next. I'm very impressed. I'm really pumped tonight, and as I said, yeah, 10 weeks doesn't happen without the support of all of you guys, so thank you so much for joining me and sharing it and watching it. And if you want to go ahead and hit that invite button or share it away and let people know that may be interested in tonight's topic, which is bumpy transitions, why they happen and what we can do to help fix them. So I also noticed the other day that there is a button there for you guys, which some of you may have done already. There's a little button there that says be notified when Tanja Kraus Horsemanship is live. So you can go ahead and click that button and it will tell you every single time I'm live. So you guys know it's Mondays at 7 o'clock. I do sometimes do other show live feeds as well. So sometimes I might go to a showground or something like that, or something will pop into my head and I'll go live. So if you hit that button, Facebook will tell you every single time that I'm live, if you're interested in following that. So that's the way to keep in the loop and know when I'm live. Great to have you, Beth. Thanks for joining us. And so let's get started on tonight's live show. It's bumpy transitions, why they happen, and what we can do to fix them. So I'm going to list the most common reasons why you might have bumpy transitions, and what I'm going to clarify in regards to bumpy transitions is, thank you Michael for the topic, by the way. He sent me an email saying that he was having a few bumpy transitions and he was hoping that I'd be able to cover it and give him a hand. So thank you for taking the time out to message me, because now we're all here enjoying this Monday night live. Hey Susie, and it is a really great topic. I mean, a lot of people struggle with transitions and there's lots of different reasons why. Sometimes you might have a bumpy transition in terms of the horse might stumble or something like that. Sometimes the horse might get a little bit grumpy and kick up or pig or drift sideways, or any of those things is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that you might have a bumpy transition. So the first reason that you may have bumpy transitions is that simply that the horse is green and the horse hasn't done multiple transitions. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a thought process for us humans, because we think, well, he can run around the paddock and he can walk around the paddock and he can go from walk to trot to canter in the paddock. But what we forget is that we're asking him to do it from a cue. We're asking him to do it in a specific time frame and at a specific location, particularly if we're doing any kind of dressage or cowboy dressage or working equitation. We might be asking the horse specifically to lope at a specific spot and trot at a specific spot. So there's a little bit of accuracy there. So the horses are inexperienced in regards to being asked to do it on a cue, being asked to do it at a specific time that you want it, and also the horse may simply not be used to carrying the rider and trying to figure out their legs with the weight of the rider and the saddle. And we also tend to forget that the saddle is obviously sort of, you know, gripping around their rib cage and around their chest there, so it is restrictive in some way. So when the horse, for example, goes up into a canter, and traditionally the canter is normally where people experience the most problems. Hey Rachel, how you doing? Typically in the canter is where people experience the most problems, and what we fail to recognize is that not only does a horse have to organize his feet and figure out how to get into that canter with us on their back, but they also have to get on the correct lead if we're asking them for the correct lead. And we're probably restricting them in multiple ways, but one of those ways is going to be that their rib cage is going to expand and that girth is going to restrict them. And for some horses, this feels like something gripping around them. Depending on, I'm not going to go very far into, you know, tightness of your girth or anything like that. Hey, Karen. I don't want to go into tightness of girth because that's up to you, but it is something that you need to keep in the back of your mind. If you've got either really rolly horses or you've got a saddle that doesn't fit very well and so you're having to really tighten that saddle, hey Jamie, then that's something that's going to contribute to, obviously, as the horse is doing transitions and they're having to move their body, that girth is going to grip around them. So interruption from the gear is one of the reasons that the horse may have a problem in the transition. Your green or inexperienced horse is trying to figure out how to do a transition from a cue and with the weight of the rider and the interference of the saddle on his back. So it's not a simple thing for a horse to learn and a horse to become fluent in it, I guess. And so with a green horse, it's important to keep that in the back of our minds and really set them up really well to allow that transition to happen. The second thing, or the third thing that may be a problem with the horse is with the transition is that it is a habit. So some of you might have horses out there that have always been sticky going into the canter, or they've always had a trouble coming down from the canter back to the trot, and that could be a habit that's been in there from a very early stage, maybe perhaps when the horse was started on the saddle, or he might have had a particular rider that rode in a particular way. And that could be something that the horse just thinks that they need to do. They just, you know, some horses will backfire into the canter and it may never have been addressed. And so the horse just does that as part of his natural transition, okay? So the fourth thing is pain or discomfort. So having our horse that habitually has a struggle in the transitions, as I said, their body's doing all sorts of things when they're going up in the transitions. So we need to be aware that if transitions are a particular issue for the horse, that there might be pain there. Maybe their back's out, it might be chiropractic, it could be muscular, it could be saddle fit, it could be any of those things. It could be their teeth. It could be anything really. So pain is definitely something that we need to take into consideration when we've got bumpy transitions. A lack of balance in the horse. So I see a lot of horses that struggle with their transitions when they have been allowed to be on the forehand and they've been allowed to run into a transition. So oftentimes when we're first training a horse, or we're first teaching a horse to go from, for example, from the trot into the canter, what we'll typically do, or what inexperienced people do, I should say, is they will let the horse trot, 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 and then they fall into the canter. So that isn't even a transition. That's simply the horse running so fast that he's got no choice but to strike into the canter. So often what will happen in the paddock is exactly that. You'll see the horses will start running up the paddock. They'll be running, trotting up the paddock, and then all of a sudden they'll come into a canter. That's typically the horse just running until he wants to fall into the canter. It's not a transition as we would call it, in terms of asking for the horse to gather himself and balance himself and transition into the next gait. So a lack of balance can be one of the issues that could cause bumpy transitions. Anticipation of something happening with the rider is another thing that the horse can find, that the horse will develop a habit of protecting themselves from the rider when they've experienced some kind of maybe blockage or discomfort from the rider in the transitions. And hey Amy, this can be one of the reasons that the horse struggles in the transitions, because it's happened every single time that they've gone to do, for example, a canter transition, and so they start to anticipate that. So the rider's up there saying canter, and the horse goes, well, I'm going to canter, but I know that as I jump into the canter, I'm going to run into the hands of the rider. I'm going to run into the bridle, or I'm going to run into the hackamore, or whatever it is that the rider's doing, or I'm being asked for the canter and the rider's gripping, or something like that. The final thing that I'm going to talk about tonight, or the final reason that these bumpy transitions might be happening, is the riders balance themselves, and I've seen a lot of riders, particularly that have lacked confidence in regards to going up into the canter, that finally want to go into the canter, and they'll be, hey Lisa, and they'll be, you know, just about to ask the horse to canter, and they're like, yep, canter, and then they go, oh no, I don't want you to. Oh, yep, canter, oh no, I don't want you to. And so the horse learns that he's actually going to get slowed down immediately after the gate, or after the transition into the canter, or again he's going to run into the hand, or something like that. A lack of balance on the rider's part can be really uncomfortable for the horse as well. So if you're not very balanced in the trot or the canter, then the horse is probably going to be reluctant in going into that gate, because they're going to think, well, when I trot, the rider just bounces up and down on my back and you know, pummels the saddle, which comes through onto my spine, and I don't really like it, so I'm going to protest going up into the trot. Or the rider grips in the canter, and I run into the hands and they grip me with their legs and it's restrictive, so I'm going to protest the transition. So that's the final reason that the horse could be, they could be some of the reasons that the horses have for not wanting to do those transitions. So what we're going to talk about now is how we can actually fix those problems, and how we can address those problems and help the horses and the riders correct the transitions and correct the bump in the transition, so the kicking out or whatever. So with a green horse, it's really important to realize that a green horse hasn't had hundreds of transitions. If you've only been riding a horse for a few months, if a horse has only been under saddle for a few months, it's unlikely that that horse has experienced hundreds of transitions into the trot and hundreds of transitions into the canter. So that's something that we need to consider in regards to a green horse, that their experience needs to be good in regards to the transition. You need to motivate them, get out of their way, and reward often. So with a green horse, if I am, for example, working on a canter transition, depending on where they are in their training, when I'm first starting a horse under saddle, that first time that they strike off into the canter, I may only ask them to lope for 2 or 3 strides, and then I might quit the ride, because I want the horse to go, wow, that canter was no big deal. I got the ride finished after 2 or 3 strides. I'm happy, the owner's happy, we're all happy. And then as we begin to progress, we might do more transitions within a training session and quit, or we might ask them to lope for a little bit longer. But if in the first few months of riding, you ask that horse to pop into a canter and then he has to do 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 canter circles, then he's probably not really motivated to go into the canter, because he's thinking, well, all I'm going to do is lope and lope and lope and lope and lope. And the problem isn't usually maintaining the canter. The problem is usually doing the transition into the canter. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. So for your green horse, reward often and build the repetition so he understands what you're looking for in those transitions. How do you get them to slow down into a lope? So slowing them down into a lope, if they're rushing in the canter, this can be an on the forehand issue for the horse. So if the horse is falling onto the forehand, it's sort of like a child running down a hill. So when the child first starts running down the hill, it's all fun and games and they're laughing and everything's fine because they've instigated the run. But at some point when that child is running down the hill, momentum kicks in, and that child actually can't stop his legs from, he's only running to stop his face from hitting the dirt. The same thing can happen with our horses, particularly young or inexperienced horses, with that weight of the rider and the saddle on their back. Those horses can feel sort of a forward pressure and they'll start to fall onto the forehand, and then they'll start to just canter faster and faster and faster to stop themselves from tripping over. So what we need to do in our body is to make sure that we're taking care of our own posture, that we're not falling forward or that we haven't lost our balance. We need to hold our own posture and bring ourselves further upright, make sure that we're breathing in an even rhythm. Make sure that we're not gripping onto the horse anywhere, causing the horse to rush off, and teach the horse to rebalance himself. Also transitions down into the trot and asking him to rebalance and then going back up into the canter is going to help the horse anticipate or maintain a better rhythm in that canter. Any advice for ex-pacers and pacing? I will keep that in mind, Jamie, and if I can come back to it, I definitely will. Otherwise, I will send you a private message. Are transitions better to start on a circle or a straight line? I prefer to work horses on straight lines, particularly green horses. If I work too many circles, the horses will learn to motorbike and lean in. So I think I always say, as a general rule, and I know that the people watching that haven't been to courses and things like that, you're only getting a little snapshot of me. It's not a hard and fast rule, but I generally, one of my general statements that I make is that I don't like circles for horses. Circles can cause more issues than benefits that they create. So I like to work in straight lines to promote balance and things like that. So that's our green horses. When you're talking about equipment, it's a good idea to just take a look at your equipment especially if you've got a horse that does have an issue in regards to transitions. You want to, consider how tight your girth is. You want to consider, I had a horse once that was really sensitive, and the strings of my saddle, every time we went up in a lope, she was quite small, and I had quite a reasonable sized Western saddle. I had strings hanging down the side. Whenever we went into a lope, those strings would hit her in the flanks. And it just took me a couple of times to realize, well, she's not normally like this in the transitions. There's something going on. And then we tied up the strings, and that solved the issue. So a little bit of an equipment check is always a valuable thing to do. Why would it feel like we're going sideways sometimes in the canter? I would say that's a balance issue. So crabbing sideways, that's the horse unable to maintain his straightness. So it's either a balance issue or it's a collective issue. The horse is not using his hindquarters properly and holding himself in posture, so he's drifting sideways. At what stage do you ask a green horse to canter? It would depend. It depends on the age and the breed and all the rest of it. When I start horses under saddle, I always like to, I ask them to canter within the first week we've got them cantering under saddle. We're not cantering them for extended periods of time, but the horses absolutely need to have walk, trot and canter under their belt as something that they accept in regards to a normal part of their training. That's my personal philosophy. I like to have all of the gaits in there. I won't spend an extreme amount of time in any of the gaits, particularly on a green horse, but I do want the horse to experience all the gaits. I don't like the thought of having a green horse and walking around on it for 6 months and then all of a sudden I ask it to trot and the horse says, this wasn't part of our deal. We haven't been doing this. What's this trotting business? I like to, I call it having honesty with the horse. So I like to present in the first 3 weeks of that horse's start under saddle, I like to present most of the things he's going to experience in terms of, legs, hands, transitions, what's going to be expected of him throughout his life. Obviously, he doesn't come out of that 3 weeks being a Grand Prix dressage horse, far from it, but he certainly has experienced lateral bends and lateral movements, transitions up and down, stops, backups, and all that sort of thing. So fairly early on, I guess, is the short answer to that question. How do you rebalance for a downward transition when a horse is likely to quit the canter at any opportunity? So I want to get ahead of that horse. I want to try and get in front of that horse's thought process because I want to make the decision that we're going down to the trot instead of the horse making the decision that we're going down into the trot. And once I start to do that enough, I want the horse to... the horse, my point of doing that is that the horse starts to have the opinion of, okay, well, she's going to ask me to trot, so there is a downward transition coming. Sometimes horses that are that want to keep stopping, it can be maybe that they've been loped, and so they feel like that they need to make that decision because they don't feel like the rider's going to make that decision. It's not always the case, but sometimes that can be the case. Sometimes it's a lack of balance, sometimes it's a laziness issue, and I do that because there's other factors when we talk about horses being lazy as opposed to a horse just lacking motivation. So equipment checking. Then the next thing that we spoke about was a habitual thing. So if you've got a horse that's always backfired, and when I say backfire, you ask the horse to canter and they'll give you a little kick up or a little pig root or something like that. You might have had a horse that's just done that for its whole time with you or what have you. What you want to do is go through a bit of a restarting process. So you're going to rebuild your expectation in the canter and you're going to take the horse back online at liberty and then under saddle to teach the horse what your expectation is in regards to that canter transition. Because sometimes if that's been left in there, even from way back when the horse was started, that's what the horse thinks he needs to do to get into the canter. So we need to approach it in a different way and help the horse understand that he doesn't actually need to kick up in the canter. Something to consider there is observing the horse in the herd. If the horse is kicking up in, like when he's just cantering around the paddock, I would be checking that horse for a chiropractic or some sort of physical issue, because that can be something. If he's doing it in the paddock without the rider, without being cued to do it, then it's probably a physical issue that's occurred in there. It's not, it's likely to be something that can be addressed, hopefully. So with a habitual horse, we want to go through a bit of a restarting process. So back to online, back to liberty, and back to baby steps under saddle. Even if you've got a horse that's been doing it for 5 years, and when I say a restarting process, you don't have to, go through a 3-week colt start, not that there would be anything wrong with that at all, and then go through a 6 months period where you rebuild the canter, because you might have a horse that kicks out in the canter, but then is happy to lope along for however long. So you're ahead of the game in terms of them maintaining the canter, but it's just the transition that you're trying to fix and readdress. So that's going to be your focus. That brings us to the next issue, which is pain. So observing the horse in the paddock and seeing what he does in regards to his transitions in the paddock will give you a good indicator of whether he needs to get checked in regards to pain, but it might not be the be all and end all. I'm not saying if your horse canters perfectly and trots perfectly in the paddock, don't get him checked because he's fine, because maybe your gear's interrupting him, or maybe you're interrupting him, or something of that nature. So I definitely recommend having the horse assessed if you're having bumpy transitions, unless you think that we've spoken about something tonight that you can say, oh yeah, you know, he's just green, I'm going to work on it because I think he's green. It never hurts to get a vet or a chiropractor or a body worker or any of those kind of people to assess the horse. Feet are something that we need to touch on here, just in regards to the horse's balance and ability to feel where they are. If they're badly unbalanced in their hooves, then that can be causing an issue, obviously, all the way up into the transition. So that's something to take into consideration, particularly if you have a horse that trips a lot. I would be having a look not only at his balance and collection, but at his feet, and making sure that his feet aren't too long, or that, you know, how he carries himself and things like that. In the pain, you need to check the saddle, and you need to check the horse's teeth as well. We had a horse at the clinic just on the weekend that a lady had purchased, and when she got him home and got him all assessed and everything like that, it was discovered that a tooth had been removed. I hope I get this right. A tooth had been removed, and the top tooth had grown into the hole. So that poor horse was not able to move his jaw properly in any way. And he was sold as a quiet riding horse, he's fine, etc., etc. So he was being ridden like that, and you can imagine what that was causing in terms of his jaw movement. So having the horses assessed on a regular basis makes sure that you can cross that off your list in terms of pain or discomfort. A lack of balance is the next thing that we spoke about. So that child running down the hill and getting to the point of momentum where they couldn't control their feet anymore. Our horses can do the same thing, and often it's not something that we take into consideration because we think, oh, he's a horse, of course he can balance. Well, we've just put an extra 20% of his body, 20% extra body weight on top of him with the saddle and the rider. Most of the time, 15 to 20% extra body weight. And what we've also done is asked him to listen to a cue and respond to a cue in a particular way. We're also interrupting him with our hands, whether we're riding, no matter what we're riding in, a hackamore or whatever, bridle, doesn't matter. We're still interrupting that horse's body posture and position and feel because we're riding them. So a lack of balance, the horse needs to be taught how to do transitions with a rider on them. And as I addressed earlier, sometimes riders will allow the horse to actually just go faster and fall into a transition rather than actually gather themselves up and get balanced and go upwards in the transition. So we need to focus on asking the horse, preparing the horse well before the transition so they're able to do it from a point of balance. So educating ourselves as the rider as to how the horse feels when he is out of balance, how he feels when we ask him to collect up. And a collection should be, it should feel slower. He won't necessarily be slower, but if you think about yourself and you think about yourself walking down the street, if you collect yourself and engage your core and walk with purpose and in a balanced fashion, it feels a lot different to if you're trying to get somewhere in a hurry and you're leaning forward and you're just putting your feet one in front of the other to stop your face from hitting the ground. It's a really cool exercise to actually sit in a shopping center and watch people go by, and you'll be surprised at how many people are not actually walking. They're just preventing themselves from falling over because of their body position. They're sort of top heavy and they're leant over, and they're actually just falling over. They're not walking in posture. It's the same principle for our horses. We need to teach them to carry themselves in posture, and that's what's going to help them balance and compensate for the rider and travel correctly, and it's going to contribute to their longevity. We see a lot of horses breaking down in the front end because we allow them to travel on the front end all the time. So if we can encourage the horse to collect and balance himself properly and engage his hindquarter, then we're going to be asking him to do transitions from a point of balance. So that's something that we need to educate ourselves on for those who might be watching, who are saying, well, I don't even know how to collect my horse or whatever. Obviously, these are things that we address in different clinics and things like that. And if it is something that you're not sure of, then I would recommend, educating yourself in that regard. Because if we're just out there and we're saying to the horse, oh, trot, 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 okay, canter, then we're just letting him get what we call strung out, and we're letting him fall into the transition instead of correctly gather himself and balance himself into a transition. So it would be the same as myself, going from a walk into a run. I'm either going to fall over or I'm going to gather myself and I'm going to strike off in a correct run. So I hope that gives a little bit of a visual and everyone's understanding what I'm trying to say in regards to helping the horse with a lack of balance. Anticipation of the rider. So anticipation of the rider and the rider blocking, they sort of go hand in hand. Horses can definitely anticipate what's going to happen in regards to a transition, because if we're thinking of cantering at that tree or at that letter in the arena or at that point in the arena, our body starts to prepare for the canter. And what generally happens when our body starts to prepare for the canter is that we might, hopefully we're relaxed and we're okay about it, and we're just going to collect our body and we're going to start to get in a position ready for the canter. Well, this translates to the horse immediately, and if we've ridden the horse for long enough, the horse can feel, oh, we're about to canter, because we're getting out. We do the same thing every single time because we're so repetitive in terms of our transitions and what we do just before the transition. So the horse starts to anticipate what's going to happen. And if he's worried about the transition, or he's worried about the gait following the transition, this could start to cause him to get tense, and that tension is then released when you ask for the upward transition. So just the simple anticipation of the gait of the upward transition can cause the horse to tighten his body and muck up or kick out or protest or something like that before the transition happens or during the transition. To help our horse with regards to this, I would take him back to being online, and I would rebuild a canter transition so the horse isn't actually feeling my body and he's able to get confident and comfortable in regards to the transition and the gait. If my horse does feel like he's anticipating from a worried or an anxious perspective, I'm going to go ahead and go back and review all of those things that we just spoke about. Is my saddle pinching him in the canter? Does he run into my hands in the canter? What is making this horse worried about the upward transition? Is he excited to go in an upward transition? Is he anticipating some kind of, gallop or something like that? I don't know. It's something that we need to think about. If we're going to go into the canter and our horse gets worried or anxious and starts to kick up, then that's his anticipation of the gait. He's either worried or he's excited, and we need to figure out why, and then we go back to online and maybe Liberty or something like that to help fix it. If it's a rider blockage issue, so I see many riders that'll sort of grip onto the horse, or once the horse starts cantering, those legs will go on because the rider's trying to balance themselves. And what will happen is the horse will go faster, and then the rider will ask the horse to slow down, and so the horse is experiencing the legs are on and the hands are saying stop, and the rider's saying I want you to keep cantering but not so fast, and it all sort of snowballs from there. And this can really cause our horses to become stroppy in the transitions or have an issue with the transitions because they think, well, you know, this isn't going to be comfortable for me, I don't want to do this. So the protests begin. If you are listening to that and you're thinking, oh look, I think that's probably me, I think I tighten my body, or I hold my breath, or I know I grip on with my legs, then taking it back to working on your own body position in the canter, and hopefully you'll be able to source perhaps a horse that can be lunged for you to do it, so you don't actually have to worry about your hands, or a schoolmaster that you can go and get some lessons on or something like that. Ultimately, I would like any rider should be able to put their hands out to the side, ask a horse to canter, and ride that canter without having to grip with the legs or something like that. So if that thought is quite breathtaking to you because you think I would fall off, then that would indicate to me that you're using your reins for balance, or you're gripping on with your legs for balance. If the thought of loping along with no hands or even, you know, no stirrups, no hands really makes you think, no, I'd fall off if I did that, then you've got a balance issue in yourself that you need to fix. And it's probably going to be quite difficult for you to fix it on the horse that's giving you those bumpy transitions, because you're going to anticipate that the horse is going to kick up in the canter or up into the trot, and so you're still going to tighten your body, and it's just going to snowball and snowball and snowball from there. Whereas if you can go and find yourself a horse that can be lunged, so someone can take the responsibility away from you and you can just focus on your balance and your body position, then you're going to improve your canter seat. And maybe at the same time you could have an experienced rider start to show your horse smooth transition without the rider gripping and without the rider balancing on the reins, and then both of you are getting help separately, and then once you come back together, there hopefully wouldn't be as many issues in regards to the bumpy transitions. So as per usual, we do have an information sheet available about what I've spoken about tonight. So there was 7 different considerations to take on board when it comes to bumpy transitions, why we have them, and the fixes to go with them. So if anyone would like an information sheet emailed to them, then you can go ahead and send me a private message and ask for that to be emailed out to you, and we will do that in the next week or so. Once it's all been done up into a PDF, we'll send it out. We're more than happy to send that information out to you. If you would like to follow us and make sure that you hear about the Monday night lives and things like that, follow our Facebook page, Tanja Kraus Horsemanship. Click on that follow button and tick follow first. And what this does, Facebook makes sure that you will receive all of the posts that we put on Facebook, not just the random ones that they think you might be interested in or the ones that your friends have commented on. We also have an Instagram and a YouTube account, so if you're interested in following us on there, we'd love to see you there. That would be wonderful. And next week's Monday Night Live is going to be on cross-training. So cross-training, making sure it's beneficial, not detrimental to your horse. So we're going to look at the different elements of cross-training, how we can use cross-training to help all of our horses in different disciplines and what we use our horses for. I'm a real advocate for cross-training, but it must be done correctly. I've seen some different people approach cross-training in different ways, and I have seen it be detrimental to the horse. So that's our next week's topic. Thank you so much for joining me on our 10th Monday Night Live show. It's you guys who make it so successful because you tune in and you motivate me to keep tuning in on a Monday night. So thank you very much for joining me and for sharing and inviting your friends and all that sort of stuff. And I hope you all have a great week. Keep the posts coming on the TKH 100. You can see I've created a little hashtag there, hashtag TKH 100. We'll make sure that I get to see all of your posts when it comes to your 100-day challenges as well. So please let me know how you're going with your horses. Suggest any topics that you'd like me to cover in our Monday night lives, and I'll talk to you all during the week. Have a great one.